warning I want to give you. Not only is youth ministry tremendously rewarding and probably the coolest, funnest thing you can do in Christian ministry, it's also very dangerous because teenagers have no filter. You know what I mean? A high school sophomore boy has no filter. It's all throttle, no brake. And if you want to, try to reach those kinds of people, you got to be fast with them, I guess. And so I've spent a lifetime hurting myself in youth ministry. Notice the big scar right here? And I have one on my back where they fused through my vertebrae about 4 months ago. And just a few weeks ago, I got a brand new hip right here. So if I'm walking a little funny, that's probably why. So youth ministry is really difficult, but I now have a new theme song. All right, so let me see if I can attach here to screen sharing. Not now. Are we up? Screen sharing. All right, screen sharing. Come on. There we go. Well, come on. No, even though it's a Mac, sometimes it doesn't do exactly what you want. There we go. All right, so anybody know Tim Hawkins? Yes. All right, here's my new theme song. All right, let's make sure the volume's all the way up.
It's kind of up on the Garth Brooks, I think. I would love to hear what Garth is going to sing up into his 80s, so let's just with Garth.
My new theme song.
My buddies and me were once wild and free. Now we ain't doing so great. We used to go down a terrible town, and now we're all in bed by 8. Our parties are fewer. We're sipping insured. Instead of our glasses champagne, now when we get together, we just talk about the weather. And all we ever do is complain. Because all my friends have hip replacements, because they slipped and fell in their garage or basement. We're old and pale, and our bones are frail. Yeah, years ago we were stealing faces. Now we spend our time having wheelchair races. Oh, all my friends have hip replacement. God bless you.
So that's my new theme song. I could tell you stories after stories after stories of things
Zach, we're gonna get set up for therapy.
that went wrong.
My office, but the desk is over here.
Quit. That went wrong in youth ministry, like the time when we were up at Big Bear tubing, and the snow was really awesome, and we found this abandoned ski hill. So we would trek all the way up to the top of the ski hill and tube all the way down, and then we got the great idea that we should dig a trench to a jump. And then we started at the top of the hill. The guys from Minnesota know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, and it depended on how brave you were, how high up the hill you went, because you would get really ripping by the time you got down into that trench. And if you hit the trench, woo! Well, I'm not the kind that is going to shy away from a challenge like that. So I went all the way up to the top. And I've got my sunglasses on, and things are really cool. And I've got my inner tube, my feet in front of me, and I start going down, and boom, 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 I'm picking up speed, and my heels click the snow, and the snow covered my sunglasses. Now I can't see where I'm going. And then pretty soon I realize I'm going backwards at about 11 miles an hour. And as I go, I'm going, no, 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 no. And I hit the trench perfectly. And into the trench I go, and up the ramp and into the air. And 53 feet later, I landed and scattered myself I mean, my arms went over there, my legs went over there, my head went rolling down the hill. I mean, it was really bad. And I'm pretty sure that's one of the reasons I have a hip replacement these days. Or all the football games that started out as two-hand touch and end up dogpiling Ken. You know how that goes. It ends up being tackle football. So if you're into youth ministry, be careful. This is a warning.
Well,
All right.
it becomes a water slide that's 10 times slicker.
Yes, that's a water slide that's 10 times slicker. So I just tell you that just because I didn't want to jump into Daniel without having something cool to talk about. All right, so let's jump into Daniel. I have something even cooler to talk about. Are you going to be able to see if I bring this around here? I switched sides today because that side was really sunny. So I thought I'd go to this side. Is this okay? Can you see the screen and everything? You guys? All right, cool. All right, so let's start this thing. Where's my cursor? It's way up there. All right. Play. All right, so we are now in chapter 5 of Daniel, and this is for Kate, right? It's Kate. When I first got here a few days before this week, I think it was like on a Friday, Stephanie Rogers brought me down here and we toured the facility. And Kate was here and she's going, "What are you teaching on?" And I went, "Daniel." And go, "Oh, are you going to do the handwriting on the wall?" And she didn't say it exactly that way, but I'm dramatizing. And I go, "Yeah." She goes, "I've always wanted to know about that." So we're going to do handwriting on the wall today, all right? So a lot of time has transpired since...
Sharpies or crowns?
So what?
Sharpies or crowns?
Sharpies or crowns?
Yeah, we're right on the wall today.
Oh, yeah. We don't get, no, it's the handwriting on the wall. So fingers. So we get to jump in quite a while after chapter 4. Nebuchadnezzar, the head of gold in the statue, has died. And a succession of heirs to the throne processed through over several years. And they all tend to get assassinated and or maneuvered out by the political machinations of all the smart guys who know exactly how to work the system to get to their benefit. And it ends up that a guy named Nabonidus. Aren't you glad you don't live in those times? How would you like to have a name like Nabonidus or Nebuchadnezzar? A guy named Nabonidus took over, and he was able to consolidate the military might that Babylon had and establish himself as the ruler of that empire. But he was like an absent king. He would rather be off fighting battles than being in the capital city of Babylon. And so he made his son, Belshazzar, the co-regent. He was like the acting king while Nabonidus was always away. All right? So that's where we find ourselves in this thing. Excuse me. There he goes. So that's where we start this whole thing. Daniel is about 81 years old now. It's been 70 or so years since he was forcibly removed from Israel and brought over to Babylon. He's now an old guy. I asked Rick when I was preparing these things, is there like an 80-year-old guy in the church who's really godly and wise and all that stuff? Rick says, "I'll think about that." He never got back to me. So there must not be any 81-year-old guys in the church that, no, that's not true. But I was hoping to have a guy that would be like Daniel to kind of like be a role model for you guys this morning. But oh well. Daniel's 81 years old. He's still in government service. He is still high-ranking officer or official in the thing. He's been able to maintain this position through the tumultuous years of transition between, factions and intrigue and assassinations and all that kind of stuff. So in chapter 5, we see some familiar themes. So let's get into it, all right? So that was the introduction. I've already told you that. All right, here's the situation. The Medes and Persians have formed a coalition, and their king is named Cyrus. And they have started moving in from the north and conquering cities as they go. Nabonidus goes out of Babylon into the north to meet that army and gets his head handed to him in a stick, almost. I mean, he suffers defeat after defeat after defeat. They keep retreating. The army now retreats into Babylon, which he thinks is an impregnable fortress. Okay? Babylon, though, is in a tough spot. Cyrus and his armies have moved in around the city, and a siege is expected to happen. You know what a siege is, right? This is where the surrounding army denies any in or out from the city, and pretty soon they're going to starve you out or rob you of all your resources, water, food, all that kind of stuff. So a siege is expected. The army has just arrived and encircled the city. And the date, we know precisely what the date is. It's October 11th, 1539 BC, or 539 BC. I've already told you that. Okay. This is what a reconstructed Babylon would look like today. It was a major city. And notice the walls. It had multiple layers of walls. Here's a wall. Here's a wall. There's a wall. There's a wall. These walls are all around the city, and they were so wide that a 4-horse chariot could make a U-turn on the walls. They were that thick, that wide. And they had built this city to defend themselves against that era's warfare, which was siege and then take on. You know, they had built up storehouses and food. They had a river. The Euphrates River ran right through the city. It was pretty much an impenetrable fortress. And it was well stocked to survive a siege of many years. They could handle that. So they're thinking, all right, yeah, Cyrus, bring it on. We can outlast you, because your guys are going to run out of food pretty soon, and we're not. And so they withdraw and hunker down inside that city, and expecting a siege. So, but the mood in the city is obviously pretty somber. You know, I mean, can you imagine if there was an army surrounding, say, Denver, Colorado? What would be the mood of the people in Denver? You know, this is no fun. We're all going to have to go on rations. This is not going to be good. The mood was pretty bad. So Belshazzar plans a feast. Oh man, I didn't get my iPad. Yes, makes perfect sense. Where did I put my bag? Oh, it's right there. All right. I need my iPad so I can read. So look up Daniel 5. And today we're going to have like volunteers read the different verses, all right? So let's have a volunteer read the first 4 verses. Your girl in the, what's your name again? Kiliana. All right. You get to read verses 1 through 5.
King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, demanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought him the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold, and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace, opposite the lampstand. The king saw the hand as it wrote.
All right, so there's the feast. How many people were there? 1,000. He wanted to show his confidence and boost the morale. Belshazzar threw a party. The party of all parties. All the who's who's were there. 1,000 of his guests. Anybody who was important in the city was at this party. It was to show the bravado, the confidence that Belshazzar had in their current condition, the situation that they faced. He was seated at separate table with his, get this, his wives and his concubines, his entire harem. Back then, he probably had 20, 30 wives and equal number of girlfriends. And so they were all seated probably in an alcove, there's an opening in one of the long walls. One of the archaeologists who first started excavating Babylon back in the 1910s, 1920s, found the palace complex, and the largest room was half a football length long and a football width wide. And then one of the longer walls was an alcove where the banquet hosts and hostess and everybody would sit, kind of like at a wedding reception where you have the special table for the bride and the groom and wedding party and stuff like that. So everybody could see him. He was sitting there. And he got the party started by drinking wine. Which set the tone. This is going to be a fun night. We are going to have a good time tonight. All right, he set the tone for that by drinking wine right off the bat. Let's see if I have this here. Now we start coming to I seem to have done the same page twice. All right. What a contrast. Here we go. Now we start seeing the contrast between Nebuchadnezzar, his grandfather, and Belshazzar. Whereas Nebuchadnezzar had conquered neighboring nations and carried off plunder and built Babylon into the wonder of the world, Belshazzar threw a party. That was about all he was good for. He was like the spoiled brat son kind of kid. Everybody, if you remember what is the movie where the prince turns into a donkey? The animated movie?
Oh, Emperor's New Groove.
Emperor's New Groove, that's the one. Remember how spoiled and bratty and that guy was, and he finally got his comeuppance? He was like that. He was that kind of guy, as far as I know. Nobody really knows, but I can. And the centerpiece, the thing that really set this apart for him, was that he had brought in some of those golden treasured items, sacred items that were brought from Jerusalem's temple to Babylon back when Daniel was brought 70 years earlier. Yeah.
Would he have actually known that that's what they were from?
Absolutely, he would have known. He would have been he's the kind of guy who would have known what everything was in the treasure room. You know what I mean? And he would have grown up hearing the stories about the accomplishments of his grandfather, and probably chafed a bit about, my grandfather, come on, why can't I have my chance? That kind of thing. And so those things taken from Jerusalem had been left in that room the entire time. Now, he brings them out, spreads them around the room, and says, everybody pour wine into these goblets. Let's drink to the gods of gold and silver and bronze and stone and wood. Let's honor those gods with these things that show that the God of Israel is not greater than our gods. That was probably a big mistake. That was probably not what he should have done. What he was exhibiting was a thing we call hubris. Have you ever heard that word? Did you know what it meant? Now you know what it means, yes. Hubris, excessive pride, or extreme self-confidence. He seems to have chosen to bring these vessels in because he wanted everybody to know he was not easily intimidated. Cyrus and his army surrounding the city, no big deal. The God of Israel, the one that humbled my grandfather, the one that, you know what I mean? All the stories that he had heard, no big deal. I'm cooler and better and stronger than those guys. So he knew about his grandfather's humbling and all that, so he showed open defiance of the God of heaven, the way his grandfather said it, as a way of showing that he was strong enough to stand up to Cyrus's army. And then it happened. All right, another volunteer to read verses 5 through 9. Okay, you got it. 5 verses 5 through 9.
Suddenly the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of a wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. His face turned pale and he was so frightened that his knees knocked together and his legs gave way. The king called out for the enchanters, astrologers, and diviners to be brought out and said to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and tell me what it means will be clothed in purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and will be made the third highest ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king what it meant. So King Belshazzar became even more terrified, and his face grew even more pale. His nobles were baffled.
So all the wise guys came in. Well, let's talk about it in order here. So suddenly, just as they are praising the gods of gold, silver, bronze, stone, wood, all that, with these precious sacred objects from the temple, a hand appears. Just the fingers, not a whole hand. The fingers appear and start writing on the wall, probably off to the side where Belshazzar was, it says where there was a lampstand, so everybody could see it, you know. So God knows how to get everybody's attention. Have you ever noticed that? He kind of knows what to do. The word appeared literally means came out. Like out of the wall comes his hand and then starts writing on it. Everyone saw it, and the partying suddenly went dead silent. And I'm sure that Belshazzar, oh, by the way, there's no writing implement included in the scripture, so I don't know if it's Sharpie or ballpoint, but it could have been just the finger leaving a trace. We don't know.
In that case, it could have been really loud.
Say again?
In that case, it could have been really loud.
It could have been really loud. But I think it was silent. Everybody just saw this finger. I have an image of the finger coming out of the wall and just start writing and impressions. And I have like the superhero movie effects where it's like flame, glowing, and then it turns dark. That kind of deal. So their hand wrote on the wall. And then we see Belshazzar's response. Another comparison between Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar. When Nebuchadnezzar's dreams puzzled him or troubled him or made him lose sleep, he would call for his guys and say, "Come and do." He didn't lose it, but Bel completely lost it. Belshazzar was completely undone by this experience. The wine blush from his face probably drained off. His thoughts troubled him. You're probably thinking, "Oh man, I have done it now. I stepped across the line I should not have." And the Aramaic phrase for his limbs gave way is literally the knots of his loins were loosened. He probably wet himself and maybe even soiled his armor. I mean, that's what that phrase actually means. How embarrassing. So then, and he calls for all his guys, and just like before, they can't read it. They don't know what it means. Either that or they could read it. Everybody could read those words. They were Persian, Aramaic kind of words. They just didn't know what it meant, So then we have the entrance of another character. Who wants to read verses 10 through, let's go divide it in half. So 18, 10 through 16. All right, you got it? 10 through 16? Yeah.
The queen, because of the words of the king and his lords, came into the banqueting hall, and the queen declared, "O king, live forever. Let not your thoughts alarm you or your color change. There is a man in your kingdom in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. explain riddles, and solve problems were found in this Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will show the interpretation. To 16.
Okay, who wants to read through 28, 17 through 28? You got it?
17, 28?
Yeah.
I think you mean 13.
Yeah,
We've only gotten
Yeah.
13.
You stopped at 12?
Yeah,
No.
it's not as well.
Okay, 13 through, go for it. Through 28, yeah.
Then Daniel was brought in before the king. The king answered and said to Daniel, "You are that Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom the king my father brought from Judah. I have heard of you that the spirit of the gods is in you, and that light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men and enchanters have been brought in before me to read this writing and make known to me its interpretation. But they could not show the interpretation of the matter. But I have heard that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then Daniel answered and said before the king, "Let your gifts be for yourself, and give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship in greatness and glory and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he humbled. But when his heart was lifted up, and his spirit was hardened, so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from the kingly throne, and his glory was taken from him. He was driven from among the children of mankind, and his mind was made like that of the beast, and his dwelling was with the wild donkeys. He was fed grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, until he knew that the Most High God rules the kingdom of mankind and sets over it whom he will."
Okay, and now who wants to read from 22 through 28? You got it.
But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, although you knew all this. And you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. They have brought the vessels of his house before you, and you and your lords, your wives and your concubines, have drunk wine from them. And you have praised the gods of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see or hear or know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways, you have not glorified. Then the fingers of the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written: Many, many tekel of Pharzim. This is the interpretation of each word. Many. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then Belshazzar.
There you go. We'll stop that. So, we now have the entrance of the Queen Mother, actually his grandmother, but they call her the Queen, and Belshazzar his son, but actually his grandson, to solve the kid's dilemma. This grandmother comes in, and she probably is clucking her tongue and going, "Belshazzar, Belshazzar, Belshazzar, come on." The implication of her speech is that Belshazzar ought to have known about Daniel already. He would have known only if he was more like Nebuchadnezzar. Are you starting to see a theme here where Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar are being compared? Okay. The Queen Mother's rebuke might explain Belshazzar's defensive tone to Daniel. When Daniel comes in, he says, "Oh, are you the Daniel that my grandfather brought from Israel? Not, are you the Daniel that my grandfather put in charge of Babylon?" You know, that kind of deal. He was trying to assert his dominance, even right then, over Daniel. And he was a dismissive tone to his voice. Right? He wanted to put Daniel in his place. And furthermore, he put a question mark over what Daniel could do. He says, "I have heard that you can do this, you can do that, you can do the other thing," you know, that kind of stuff. So Belshazzar is really not, he is not happy that his grandmother has come in and forced him to call this old tottering fool to help out here. He wants to be in charge himself. And he's not happy that he's having to, okay, I'll call Daniel at the demand of his grandmother. But then Daniel, he waded into him. I mean, he slams into Belshazzar with a recollection of things that Nebuchadnezzar has said. Another comparison between this foolish king and his grandfather. And he says, hey, your grandfather did this, but you have not honored the God of heaven, in whom your very breath is held. There's some incredible confrontation right there. But when you're 81 years old, you have nothing to lose, right? You can confront the king and tell him he's just a wimp and tell him he's done something really wrong. So then he reads the 4 words. Many these are all like Aramaic words, but they were used in commerce. They were denominations of coin. So people would have known what that meant. But the first one, he says, your days have been numbered. Your worth has been measured. When it's repeated, it has the second idea of that word. Tekel means you've been weighed. And you know about the balances, like the scales of justice. You know, you're on this scale, and what's required is on this scale, and you are not heavy enough. You don't balance it out. You've been weighed and found wanting. And so, parson means your kingdom is divided. So measured, numbered, measured, weighed, and divided. Yeah, the grandmother. But they call her the queen, and she calls him his son and calls Nebuchadnezzar his father. But that's all appropriate language for the royal organizations at that time. Let me see. All right, so I'm going to have, since Belshazzar had been found wanting of spiritual and moral worth in God's balances, somebody look up 1 Samuel 2:3 from this side. So 1 Samuel 2:3, somebody from this side, Job 31:6. Got it? Another person, Psalm 62:9. Who? Psalm 62:9. You got it. And then over here, Proverbs 16:2. Somebody. Back table. One of those two. You got it. Proverbs 16:2. All right. 1 Samuel 2:3. What does it say? You got it.
Talk no more so exceedingly proudly. Let no arrogance come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed.
See, don't talk proudly. The Lord is by your is. Read it again. That was really good. Do not talk foolishly.
Talk no more so exceedingly proudly.
Okay.
Let not arrogance come out of your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed.
Yeah, don't talk proudly. Don't be boastful. God will weigh your actions. What about Job 31:5?
31:5?
Yeah. 31:6. My eyes aren't good.
Let God weigh me in honest scales, and he will know that I am blameless.
There you go. Psalm 62:9.
Men of low degree are only a breath, emptiness, and the men of high rank are a lie, delusion. In the balance, they go up because they have no measurable weight or value. They are together lighter than a breath.
Self-explanatory. Proverbs 16:2.
All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit.
So the idea of weighing a person's value, is their motives, their worth, is this is throughout Scripture, and here is probably one of the first places it shows up where Belshazzar was weighed and found wanting. And the result was his kingdom was divided. So do you think Belshazzar believed Daniel? I'll read you the next verses. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and Daniel was clothed with purple. A chain of gold was put around his neck, and a proclamation was made about him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. And that very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed. Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. There's a couple of things I wanted to bring out. He carried through on his promised reward. Daniel, by the way, when he said to Daniel, hey, I'll give you the robe of purple, which means you'll be a royalty, and a necklace of gold around your neck, which means wealth, Daniel says, hey, you can't buy me. I'm not for sale. Keep your stuff for yourself. But at the end, the king, says, all right, put a purple robe on him. Nobody disobeys the king in that kind of context. Take this necklace and put it around his neck. All right? But that very night, he lost his life. Belshazzar lost his life. That very night, the historians aren't all quite absolutely sure what happens, but the legend is that Cyrus had already diverted the Euphrates River that runs underneath the walls of Babylon through the city and out, which gave Babylon a continuous supply of water. They diverted it from the city and walked in while the party was going on, unopposed, and took the city without a fight. And they walked right into the middle of the party and killed the king right then and there. I wouldn't want to be Belshazzar. Yeah.
Don't they, why, at this particular time, I don't think Daniel would want to be in purple and chains.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, I'm not official. Yeah, so maybe that was one reason why I said Daniel thought, keep your stuff for yourself.
But he didn't get killed.
But he didn't.
Why?
We don't know that. The Bible doesn't say. But I can imagine that an 81-year-old man is like, maybe he's going to be useful. But the other thing is that conquering nations knew that they couldn't just subjugate a population and put their own people in charge. They had to keep the city running. Somebody had to keep collecting the trash. Somebody had to keep, keep the peace and keep the police force working and doing all that kind of stuff. And so somebody had to collect the taxes. So they would just absorb the current culture, the current government, but get rid of the head. At least that's what my brain is telling me that I remember. All right. So what? So don't be impressed by those who are in power or awed by those who have wealth. The influencers, the celebrities, the pro athletes, the successful business people, even famous Christians. Don't be awed by them. We should only be awed by God and not by mere people. And be careful about who you admire. Most, like the gods of gold, silver, bronze, stone, wood, iron, are powerless. Maybe what we most want aren't, the power and wealth of those people who chase that, but maybe a lot of us want experiences. Be careful about chasing the next experience, the next party, the next massive wave, the next, jumping off a cliff, and the next whatever experience that you're trying to have. And the final issue really is, who are you trying to impress? Who was Belshazzar trying to impress? All his folks, with how great and mighty and fearless he was. But when that hand came out of the wall and started writing on it, he soiled himself. And nobody was impressed. I've helped form and rehearse and work with lots of youth ministry worship teams. And the very first lesson that we cover relates to this. Most people think worship is the people on the stage, the band and the singers are the performers. The people in the room are the audience. And God's kind of in the sidelines helping the performers really get through to the audience. That should not be the way it is. Instead, the people in the audience are the performers. God is the audience. And the people on stage are off to the side encouraging the performance of the people in the room. Make sense? In the same way, your life should be lived for God is the audience. And you're helping, and you are the performer, and the people and friends and ministries and churches and speakers and all that, we're just on the sideline trying to help you perform for that audience. Belshazzar was performing for the wrong audience. Don't make the same mistake. All right, any questions or any yeah buts or what buts? Yeah.
But why was it fingers?
Why was it fingers?
So out of pocket, it seems so like.
It seems so random, but I think that was for effect. I mean, God could have sent a scary angelic being, with eyes like headlights and, a flaming sword and says, you guys are all going to die. He could have done that, but I think he was trying to get through to Belshazzar. And Belshazzar did not respond well. So, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that when God sent a message to Nebuchadnezzar, he had a whole year to repent.
Yeah.
And Belshazzar
He did. He had just 15 minutes. It was precisely right then. But also, yeah, I don't understand. I don't pretend to know God's understanding or God's timing. There's no way to be able to. We don't really know what God is doing in advance. We only know what He's done. We can only see what God has done in the rearview mirror. We can't really see it in advance. So I don't know. Yeah.
Was he part of Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom? So
Belshazzar? Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he was part of the gold, which
Right. Yeah. The gold was Nebuchadnezzar, and then there was that transition probably between him and the silver part of the statue. Yeah. But yeah, he was in that family, and it was like back then the family could include. He could have been like a person or two removed, not a direct line.
Well, no, I get that. I'm just wondering, in the metaphor of the kingdoms that fell,
right.
Would he be part of that?
That gold stand, yeah. And he would be at the very end when it turned into silver. Yeah. Anybody else? Any questions? Any yeah buts? Yeah, what else? Yeah.
So I remember you saying they didn't record the history of Nebuchadnezzar turning into the beast, or
Yeah.
or eating grass and all that stuff for
Right.
however many years he did.
7.
The 7 years he did, right?
Right.
So does that mean when Daniel was recanting the story, that those 1,000 lords had never heard it before, or was everybody aware, they just didn't write it down?
Yeah, the historian, everybody is aware, the historian was writing these things for Jewish people who were in exile and were longing for home, and for the people at home who were in turmoil because their homes had been destroyed, So the book was written to encourage those people. And so they had to tell stories that those people probably hadn't heard of.
But it probably wasn't in King's Chronicles and being read to Belshazzar while he fell asleep.
Right, exactly. No, that was that was not happening. So this was not written for a Babylonian audience. It was written for the Jews in Babylon. There were tens of thousands of them.
I was just curious if Daniel was saying it, that was the first time those 1,000 lords had heard that story of Nebuchadnezzar being.
I doubt it. I think those noble people, they had to go, oh my goodness, we got to keep this government going while this guy's out in the pasture eating grass. So they all knew, but everybody kept doing their job, and lasted 7 years. Yeah.
Isn't chapter 4 like Nebuchadnezzar kind of like telling everybody what happened? Because in chapter 4 it starts off by saying like King Nebuchadnezzar to the people.
Yeah, so chapter 4 is Nebuchadnezzar's personal writing. It's first person from Nebuchadnezzar, yeah.
So didn't he like tell everybody that that happened?
Yeah, I imagine he
So
did.
they would have been aware.
Yeah, they would. The whole nation would have been aware. Good call. Good call. So yeah, then the historian took that writing and added it to the book of Daniel, and then Daniel added his first-person stuff and all that, and it became a compilation. Any other questions? Okay, we're done. All right, I'll see you in an hour. And now we get to deal with the lion's den.